right, well, welcome everybody. We have a panel here today with Mauricio Antón. Welcome, Mauricio.
Thank you.
And Mauricio was the Baszler Chair of Excellence here at East Tennessee State University last year. And during his time was able to make it out with Steve Wallace and myself on a number of different hikes and trips to go out and see nature. And he taught paleo art classes, and he also taught scientific illustration and all sorts of interactives that he did with the students when he was here before we all got shut inside with the pandemic. And he did a lot of exploring on his own right out the back door on the ETSU trails. And actually a lot of the footage here is from that. Isn't that right, Mauricio?
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. I think the most interesting behavior that I recorded is from the ETU's forest trails.
Dang, yeah, I mean, well, we'll see. But as is out there, the video's been out there so people could see it. And we're coming to you from East Tennessee State University and the Center of Excellence in Paleontology and the Gray Fossil Site. We have David Moscato also with us, our science communicator, and Chris Wigga with us as well, our head curator. Steve Wallace is one of our curators at the museum and professor in geosciences. And again, he and I were the primary hosts of Mauricio when he was here. And so excited to have you, Mauricio.
Very happy to be together again, even if only digitally.
And I know that you had a little bit you wanted to talk about before we get to the question and answer, and maybe talk about some of the footage as well.
Yeah, something very, very quick. That's just an overview of the experience and the making of.
And David, do you want to remind people, David, on how they can reach out and ask questions?
Absolutely. So yeah, we're going to start with a presentation by Mauricio very quickly, and then we're going to get into questions. And I know that everybody on this panel is going to have things they want to ask Mauricio, but we'll also be taking questions from the audience. So if you are watching us live on Facebook, you can put your questions in the Facebook comments, and we'll be keeping an eye on those. And as always, same rules as Paleo Talks. If you can't leave a comment on Facebook for whatever reason, I'll be keeping an eye on the Gray Fossil Site Twitter and Instagram accounts, so you can send us a message there. And as a note for everybody, if you want to have Mauricio's film, if you want to have Appalachian Awakening pulled up, there is a link to the YouTube video in the video description of this Facebook video, if you want to pull it up and be able to scroll through it while we're talking.
All right, Mauricio, take it away.
Okay, good. So let me try and share my screen. Okay. So I hope all of you have already seen Appalachian Awakening, and I call it a portrait of nature next to home, to emphasize the fact that I got to really come up close and personal with these new wild acquaintances of mine. And that was not what I was expecting. I was really eager to get to know the nature of East Tennessee as a bonus to my experience teaching there. But I would just expect like fleeting glimpses of the wildlife. But instead, as you can see in this series of pictures, the animals really allowed me to see far more than I expected. So, okay. We had rehearsed this. I don't know why it's okay. So home for me was Governor's Hall at ETSU campus, and it was not only very conveniently placed near some of the entrances to the forest trails, but actually wildlife came quite close. And the most amazing, or rather dramatic, example of animal behavior, I saw it right through my ground level apartment window, which was the active predation of crow, which hunted a sparrow right in front of my window. And you know, I was just cooking my food and my lunch, and I hear like some alarm calls in front of my window, and I look and I see right in the floor this crow, you know, like hammering with its beak, and this poor sparrow was like, no, no, no. And I went and grabbed my camera, but the problem is it was too close. So I had the blind of the window getting in the way, and if I had tried to open it, I would have scared the animal. So I couldn't make a brilliant film of that. So it was left out. But you see here a still as a proof that I saw what I'm telling you I saw. Now I used a simple camcorder for filming all this footage, and I found it especially fit for wildlife and woodland filming, because it has this powerful zoom. It's 20 times, so it's the equivalent of 500 millimeters, what you would have in a zoom in a photo, in a reflex camera. And it also has manual controls. And you know, when filming in the African savanna, I normally use the autofocus all the time, and it works fine. But filming in the Appalachian woods, there will always be branches and leaves between me and the animals. So it was hopeless to try to film with autofocus. So these manual controls of this camera were really handy, so I could make manual focus and everything. So locations. The ETSU forest trails, once you enter there, it feels like you are in the middle of the Smoky Mountains or anything. It's really a well-preserved patch of forest. It's a nice belt around a large part of the campus. And it kept me sane through the lockdown, because really it was one thing I could do. I could just go out and exercise every day. So every day I got more and more used to the habits of the animals, and they got used to my intrusions. So eventually they didn't mind me being there. So that's what allowed me to record this kind of behavior, especially the squirrels and the hawks. Buffalo Mountain Park is another nearby natural area where I saw my first salamanders with the expert guidance of Blaine. So that was like the starter. Then Base Mountain, it's another conveniently located natural area, but you need to drive a little bit longer to get there. And you know, walking around these spectacular beaver ponds, I got to feel the presence of the beavers, but I never saw one. So that will be for another visit, and when I go in a warmer season where the beavers will be active, hopefully. There's Laurel Falls, where I got to see this spectacular, really postcard waterfalls. And there is Rocky Fork Park with commanding views of the forests and all the mountains around, and some really neat salamanders. And then there's the jewel of the national parks there, Smoky Mountains, and that's where the big preachers live. And so that's where we managed to see and film the black bears, the elks, which were unfortunately left out of the final cut. And it's also a place where apparently there are plenty of occasions to walk your bikes, because after you see a sign like this one, even if the curves don't feel too sharp or the grade too steep, you really don't want to go through that. I mean, that sign is so graphic that it was almost scary in a way. And so within all this variety of locations, still the core of the story, the stars of the film, were my friends from the forest trails, the gray squirrel, and well, some hawk. You know, it was so tricky to identify the hawk, because you have the Cooper's hawk and the sharp-shinned hawk living in the same range. They overlap, and I really spent a lot of time looking at the identification keys on the internet, what kind of hawk I am filming. And I really got so up close with these hawks. And still, I arrived to a solution to call them Cooper's hawks, because they seem to have more ID tips corresponding to Cooper than to sharp shin. But I still wouldn't swear that they are Coopers. So let's call it a provisional ID. And there are those sideshows that didn't make it to the final cut. So within the next few days, I plan to upload the director's cut with all these other friends in it, and to make it available as well in my YouTube channel. So stay tuned, so you can see the adventures of the elks, the water snakes, and the towhee. Towhee is an amazing little bird, and it has a very gymnastic way of catching its bugs from under the dry leaves, and of course the groundhog, among others. And there are the captive wolves from Base Mountain, and we had a nice session with their caretaker, who showed us the behavior of this captive pack, and they were so beautiful that I really had like a small chapter for them, where I would show their footage in black and white, like, okay, this is the kind of predators that the white-tailed deer and the elk would fear in the past, and now no more. But again, that was left out because of time considerations. And at a past even more distant than the times of the wolves in Tennessee, there were red pandas, the gray fossil-side red panda. And every now and then, when seeing a nice corner of the forest, I would almost see it, you know, after spending the day working with the fossils and making anatomical reconstructions of the animal. It was like, can you imagine, Blaine? Can you imagine Wally, if it would appear here? So okay, I made a small, quick painting.
For those people that don't know, Mauricio is a paleo artist, and as well as a documentarian. And this, Mauricio, was this at Laurel? Was this along that that hike out at Rocky Fork?
Exactly. Yeah. So I remember that I mentioned to you, look at this corner with this moss-covered log and everything. What a place to see a Miocene, a pristine Ilurus, just walking towards us. And well, eventually I did it. And it's like a war map for the more ambitious reconstructions we will do in the future, hopefully. So those are the basics. And so I had a lot of help from many people, but here you can see yourselves as the main contributors or near perpetrators of this film. So thank you all. And now I'm happy to try to answer to any questions you may have.
Mauricio, one thing I didn't mention at the beginning is that you're coming to us from Spain, and coming to the United States and seeing some of these animals, I'm guessing it was the first time for some of these types of animals that you've seen in the wild. Is that correct?
Absolutely, absolutely. I mean, we have groundhogs in Spain. We have red deer, which for a long time used to be considered the same species as the elk. Now it's thought to be different, but well, they are fairly similar. But I think that for the rest of the well, okay, I had seen gray squirrels, because almost everywhere in the States where you go, you see gray squirrels. But all the other creatures, they were new to me. And I remember the first day when Puri, my wife, and me were walking around campus, like to recognize the place. And I saw blue jays. And I was like, hey, they are real. These creatures that I have seen in photos on the internet. And so all the others were like that. The cardinal, I couldn't believe I was seeing a deep red cardinal in front of my eyes. So yeah.
So group, I haven't mentioned this yet, but if you want to ask questions, go ahead and unmute yourself when you're ready, and then we'll know.
And I'll take this opportunity to remind everybody to go ahead and leave your questions in the comments if you have questions for Mauricio. Mauricio, I wanted to start off with a quick note that I didn't mention at the top of the video. One of the reasons that we chose to do this today is that today is also Earth Day. And I think that, Earth Day is a day about appreciating the wildlife, the natural lands around us. And this is a really cool way to achieve that. One thing that I was thinking about while you were doing this is that the places you went are not, these aren't some hidden, secluded places that only, an exclusive crowd can get to. Anyone can walk to the places you were. If you did this where you live, what wildlife would be in that documentary?
Well, there is a big park in Madrid where I can walk within 15 minutes from my apartment where I live. And we have some of the same animals. So we have a big hawk in the same genus, Accipiter. So it's the goshawk. So they are there. And we have also hawks of the same type as the red-tailed hawk of the genus Buteo. And but these are far more shy. So they are there and you hear them, but you really catch fleeting glimpses of them. And if you really would, I mean, it would be impossible, just impossible to get this kind of intimate footage of the mating pair, and then not to mention them hunting right in front of you. That's a degree of really confidence that I have never found with any raptor here in Spain. And then we have rabbits and a variety of woodpeckers. But then if you want to see deer, you have to drive away from downtown Madrid for quite longer. And then you can see red deer and roe deer. And they are probably about as shy as in Tennessee.
Okay.
So there's some overlap. And of course, we have the red squirrel, and it's very similar. And in Spain, we don't have gray squirrels at all. But you know, they were introduced in England, and in England they have sort of displaced the native red squirrels, and it's become like a conflict. And some people spend a lot of time chasing the gray squirrels and killing them to leave room for the native red squirrels. And I'm happy that's not happening here in Spain, because I find the gray squirrels so cute and wonderful that really thinking of you know, shooting them just because we brought them from their native lands seems so wrong.
Oh. I was just going to say, it's really a cool thought, and I think a fun Earth Day thought, that no matter where somebody is, someone like you could go outside and get a documentary of whatever the local wildlife is in that area. All right, go ahead, Wallace. We've got a couple of questions coming in, and I'll ask them after yours.
Okay, I was just gonna ask Mauricio if you wanted to say a few words about, when you're talking about animals being shy or not shy, what you thought of the bears when we went to the Smokies, and how the bears had become strangely tolerant of people.
Yeah, it was shocking, because of course you and me were hoping to see bears in other places, and well, they are ghosts, and then they show up when they wish, that they are taking all their cautions to avoid us. So obviously it was something that you cannot separate from them being in a national park. And here in Spain, we have some areas where the brown bears are becoming more used to people. And this is a cause of concern for some wildlife officials, because, brown bears, of course, are larger than black bears. And there's always the fear that if they get used to people, there can happen things like accidents, interactions. And I got this impression that those black bears we met in the Smokies were not only tolerant of people, they were patient. Like some people were behaving in not a very intelligent way, like leaving their cars and getting in the way between a mother and a cab that was left behind. And it was like you are inviting an accident. And the fact that the mother was patient and just waited for that cub that is left behind to catch up. I really thought, okay, we are lucky that we are not finding like an individual with a more, strange mind disposition.
Yeah, I thought it was funny, because I felt that female was more frustrated with the cub than she was with us, because she seemed to be looking back at the cub like, let's go, and finally the cub came running off like, okay. But I thought it was entertaining, but she just ignored us. And I mean, it was a fantastic opportunity for pictures, at least, though.
Unfortunately,
and to see their family interactions. So but that was certainly not the merit of some of the tourists there.
Yeah, unfortunately, the bad human behavior is oftentimes on exhibit in national state parks, for sure. Mauricio, I know we have a question about the camera that you used again, and if we will post the details of that camera on Facebook so people can look that up if they're interested. But I wonder if you might comment just a little bit on the abilities to film these animals, because I know, and in being out with you, that there's a stealth behavior that you have, you know, and a patience that you have that goes along with being able to make these types of film. And so if you could just comment on that a little bit more.
Yeah, yeah. After being many times on safari in Africa, which is a very different experience, because it's more like what we did with Wally and Lauren in the Smokies, that essentially you drive around and then you see a large animal and you stop and you essentially you get what you see from the car. You may leave the car, but you stay very close to your car. And so that's a different experience from walking in the forest. But it has taught me not only patience, but something that I think is very important when you are filming the animals from a relaxed perspective. Like, I'm not hired by the BBC to film the behavior of the Cooper's hawk. So if I don't see it, I don't mind. I'm just open to whatever happens in the forest. So it's like I'm just, like doing yoga there. It's an attitude of okay, first of all, I'm going to enjoy being in the forest. And then the animals just do their things. And then when I saw that I had good footage, I said, okay, I can build a film around these, especially around these hawk encounters. And I just wait for them to live their lives in front of me. And I think that was much of the key, because I don't intrude. I'm not anxious to push the hawks and to try to get very close. I'm just there, and they establish their distance. So it was essential that I had all these lockdown, weeks and months to keep going there.
I'll ask one more before David jumps in, but the hawks are the ongoing theme, that you were following because they were right behind the university. Did they, over time, come to know you, do you think?
Well, it's I try not to deceive myself about that. So they certainly came to tolerate me. So sometimes other people were around and they wouldn't show up. And I think the frequency of encounters was much higher when I was on my own. So that's a fact. And sometimes then funny things happen, like I'm walking around the area where they normally are and I don't see them. And I say, okay, I tried. And as I'm leaving, I hear the call from a branch overhead, like, hey, you didn't see me or what? Oh, sorry. And but well, maybe they were just calling because they were calling. But certainly they did tolerate me, and it was sometimes almost ridiculous how close I was. Like having the female come to eat some prey left by the male, and then I use the manual focus, and it's calculating the distance, and it tells me 8 meters. Wow, they have come within 8 meters of me, and so that was really very satisfying.
All right, we've got a whole bunch of questions coming in from the audience, so I'm going to go through a couple of them here. First, and this is related to what you've been talking about, Janice has asked, did you conceal yourself to record these animals to get them acting naturally?
Nope. No, for many reasons. Because actually this is a public area, and I am not a professional filmmaker. And if I am, hiding under camouflage clothes or anything, people walking around could just stop and hey, what's going on here? And I would call additional attention to the animals. So in a way, I gathered that these animals were tolerant of people precisely because nobody stops to pay them attention, because people are jogging and walking up and down and biking. There's a lot of people walking up and down those trails during the year. So I found that the best way to let them act naturally was just to be one more person out there. So rather than try, my way to conceal myself was to just act naturally. Like,
so you had to...
there's a hawk, and there's also a stone here. It's interesting as well. I try not to, they know when they are paying them too much attention. They are so sensitive to that. So when I get there, I normally look in every direction, because I know they are looking at my eyeballs. Like, where are you looking? So I'm like, oh, I'm tired. Ooh. And then, wow, it's pretty, the moss there. And maybe I'm overacting it, but it worked. They just stay there. So I know I don't conceal myself at all.
Wow. All right, we've got another question. So this is a question. Actually, two people have asked very similar questions. Davis, who who was in your acknowledgements, has asked a version of this, and Nick has asked, is the landscape of East Tennessee comparable to any other part of the world that you've been to, or is this landscape totally unique for you?
No, it is unique in many ways because of the combination of the geology and the history. But in terms of having like old rounded mountains and mostly deciduous forests, it's like some parts of northern Spain, very much so actually. And so for me, it's like the kind of forest I would have longed to be surrounded by during my youth. But in Spain, we had destroyed so much of the native forest that I never was lucky enough to live near an old patch of forest. There are those. So I would say the Cantabrian mountain range, which goes east to west along northern Spain, has many areas where the kind of forest and the kind of environment are remarkably similar to the Appalachians. So I enjoyed that mixture of the familiar and the new.
All right, we've got a few more questions from the audience, but why don't we go ahead and see if anyone on our panel has another question they want to ask. Now's a good time.
Well, I have lots of questions. One of the things when we look at the video itself that I loved is that the camera really seemed to be stable. Was that the camera's ability, or was that your ability, or a combination of the two as you're watching these animals?
Well, it's a combination of those two and an additional contribution from the video editing software, because this camera has a very good optical stabilizer. So it reduces much of the wobbling or much of the motions that you make, unintended motions, I mean. The second thing is when filming, especially small animals, I usually film at half the natural speed. And because the small animals move so fast all the time, we don't even notice. We think we are seeing their behavior like at normal speed, but it is slow down, and that adds like a feeling of stability, because it reduces the speed of tremors and everything. And well, of course, I try to keep the camera very steady. But well, I'm only human, so in the end, the footage may still need some additional correction. So there is stabilizing software within the editing programs that can do some additional smoothing. It won't work miracles, but if your footage is okay, it will make it look more stable. So
Mauricio,
you need to combine all three.
I know sometimes when we're trying to build a story, like in this documentary, you shoot one image one day maybe and another part of it a different day to bring a story together. And with that chipmunk that you were showing and that story of the chipmunk, I think I was really wondering, as the music kind of got dramatic and this sunning chipmunk is then being eaten, was that really the same chipmunk?
No, not that I'm aware
good,
of.
it survived.
It survived. Yeah. In fact, I didn't know that the creature being eaten was a chipmunk until I reviewed the footage, because back then it was just like a fleshy bundle, and none of the chipmunks that I was observing died during the filming of, because last time I took the circuit, they were all there. So okay, it was from the area, so maybe it's one of the first ones I saw, I don't know. But then looking at the footage, so, hey, look at these stripes, look at, oh, it's one of the chipmunks, my God.
All right, I'll go ahead and ask another question from the audience here. Abby says, I would love to know how you were able to decide which animals to include in your documentary. There were so many unique animals that you were able to capture. I've lived in East Tennessee all my life and have not seen several of these.
Yeah, I did a first cut, which included all these other sideshows. And, our first idea for this sharing of the film was to play it live for the audience so that people would see it and then ask their questions. That's what we did with my India film back in Tennessee. We did it like a governor's hall event, and I thought it has to be shorter. So I just knew that I needed to cut it by 10-15 minutes. So the animals I left out were those whose stories I could cut off, and still that the rest of the film would flow. Like, okay, if I cut the Tohi story out, I still have the continuation, the continuity between this and that other adventure of the hawks. So that was, it was an editorial rather than biological or it wasn't a criterion related to the information, but just to the flow of the film. I just wanted to make it shorter. And then in the end, we allowed people to watch it beforehand. So I could have shown the long version and just ask you to be patient.
Were there any really difficult choices? Were there any ones that you had to cut out, but you really struggled trying to decide?
Absolutely. And the Tohi was one of them, because, it was a bird that I just heard for the first few days. And it's such a distinctive call. And then one day I see it, and it's pretty. And I go to the bird ID book that I had borrowed from the ETSU library. Okay, they say it's a migrant, so it had just arrived, and I said, I have to see more of this bird. And I would go every day to that area, missing hawk action and everything. And then finally it warmed up to me, and it played the towhee in front. So it was so satisfying to really see him doing his thing. Wow, it was hard to cut it out. And then of course the elks, because they are so big and spectacular. And when we went there, it was a very quick dash to Smoky Mountains. And Lauren said, we have to go to this particular valley where we are very likely to see the elks. But I thought, well, that would be just luck that we saw them with only one afternoon to get there. And sure enough, they were there, you know, playing for us, and wow. So it hurt to leave them out. But
I think another one of my favorite parts of the film is the woodpecker that you show. That is the large woodpecker that's really doing some damage to the tree. And you know, in my hiking, I've seen them, but have never been able to see them anywhere that close with that behavior, where they're really rearing back and hitting so hard, it looks like they're going to knock themselves out. You know, that was shocking to me. Have you ever seen that, Wally, that close like that?
Yeah, actually out here on the property I have, you know, I've sat before in a variety of localities for long periods. And what always astonishes me is sometimes, you know, you'll hear this ruckus. You're just like, what am I hearing? And what you realize is it's the debris falling down from them pecking so hard that there's just all this stuff coming down. And, you know, sometimes you almost hear the noise of it falling before you actually realize what's going on. And then you look up and you're just like, holy cow, you know, and what's surprising is they'll even do that on the ground. You know, we've had.
But I think, Wally, I think that you showed me in your property some logs with the Woodpecker Damage. Which were actually on the ground.
That's what I was talking about, or going to get to, is that, there's some that we were laying along the driveway and they have just ripped the bark off, and there's these huge holes that you can see. And I would love to witness that, but I haven't seen them on the ground. I always see them up in the, but I want to see it one of these days, because I feel like every time we walk by those logs, there's new holes in it.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I remember the first time we went to Base Mountain. Remember, I was with Blaine and Stacy and Briar, and I think Briar saw the big woodpecker, and I saw it like for a second and a half, and it was spectacular. A bird as large as a crow, and wow! And so for the rest of the hike, I was looking everywhere to see it again, and no such luck. So it took me time. It was one of the harder ones until it finally warmed up, because they were nesting up in one big tree in the not far from the hawk's nest, actually just a few hundred meters. But they would go in and out of their nest and disappear. So it took me months, and something like the last week when I was about to leave, they finally allowed me to see them on the ground. So it was like I froze. I didn't film. Like, okay, let it get used to me. And I did my old trick of looking around. I haven't seen any woodpecker. Have you seen any woodpecker? So it would start like boom, boom, boom. And so the next day, sure enough, it was there again. So I just got on my knees and filmed it at eye level. And incredibly, I left the place and it was still there. Like, sorry, okay, good luck with dismantling this log. So it was like, you know, I had invested all this time, and now I have to leave. Now that I have their trust, and now that the chicks of the hawks are about to hatch, and I could have followed their whole cycle. Gosh, that hurt. I was, of course, impatient to come back home.
Sure.
But well,
You'll have to come back and do a sequel someday.
Yep.
please.
Yeah, and I'm actually hopeful. We've the boys and I have built several bird boxes, and one of them was for pileated woodpeckers, and so I'm really hoping that
Wow,
they'll
wow.
move in. I actually went by it the other day, and something might have been peeking out of it, so I'm hoping that somebody moves in. But the box is gigantic. I mean, you have to build this huge box
Of
for
course,
them
it has to be.
because they're such a big bird.
Yeah. I was really privileged to that the last few days it just decided to act like I wasn't there. So that was spectacular. Yeah.
All right, let's do a couple more audience questions. Davis, our friend Davis, asks, now so you've been talking about all sorts of different cool encounters. Davis wants to know, what was your favorite animal observation while you were here in Tennessee?
Well, there is no contest. I mean, the hawks, let's call them Cooper's hawks at the Forest Trail, they were so special. And you know, when I would go up and down the trail every day, twice a day, and just like calculating, okay, I haven't seen them today, I didn't see them yesterday, so I have to see them tomorrow, and so on. And then one day I was just walking, and I see the hawk landing on the ground right in front of me, which it had never done, never ever. I mean, they were went from branch to branch, but landing in front of me, and I just got frozen. I look, why did he do that? It was the male. And only after a few seconds, I noticed that there's this squirrel under, you know, between its talons, like trying to escape. And I say, I shouldn't film, just, it will go. But it kept at it. So I said, okay, I will take the risk. So I take my camera from the case, and I very slowly, you know, point, focus, shoot, and there it was. And then, you know, I had this branch, like in the middle. Okay, I was focusing manually. So at last, the then camera didn't focus on the leaves, because then I would have killed myself. But okay, I was focusing the thing, and then you get like over ambitious. And I think if I kneel down, then I will have him on to eye level, looking even more impressive. So the moment I started to kneel down, he considered that the squirrel was dead enough to carry. So it took off, and I missed the takeoff. Because if I had just kept filming, I would have captured that moment with the, you know, the prey dangling. So that I kept in my brain, that no film. But the whole thing was, it's just always the same with predation. You know, I have been related to those squirrels, and I felt so sorry for the chap, like doing, let me out. But still, it's so exciting. I think it's a guilty pleasure, but it's very special. So I would place that in #1. And there have been many amazing encounters, from of course, the rattlesnake was like otherworldly, such a huge, powerful snake. and of course those black bears. I mean, there we were surrounded by other people. No, not all of them behaving properly, but I was focused on the birds, looking through the lens, and it was like I was in the Pleistocene. So it's like I don't hear any of the rockers of the people like, "Hey, mom, look at this bear." No problem. So
speaking of being in the Pleistocene, Donna has asked if you could bring back any Ice Age animal to Tennessee, what critter would you love to see? Which Ice Age animal would you love to have included in your documentary?
Again, there is no doubt. I don't know if I even have to mention it, but if we are talking Ice Age, we are talking Diego.
Oh, that's very good timing right here.
Yeah,
my cat has chosen to
yeah.
make an appearance.
Yes, Mylodon would be the creature.
Excellent.
All the others could come behind, but please, Smilodon first. Yeah, no doubt.
And then speaking of fossils, and this is a question that Mauricio, you of course can answer, and then our other panelists might join in on. Jared asks, are there animals you found during Appalachian Awakening that come from descendants of fossils found at the Gray Fossil Site? Are there many connections between now and then?
Well, not very obvious. I mean, the animals that I saw there, when you think that at Gray Fossil Site, the most spectacular, obvious things range from the red panda to the mastodon with so many tapers in between. Those are things that you don't find there remotely today. So I think that probably there's more of a continuity in the general environment than in the emblematic mammals. I'm not sure about the history of the deer, but or the bears, but certainly the kind of bird that there is at the Gray Fossil Site is not necessarily closely related to black bears. I defer to Wally and Blaine there.
Not very similar.
I think you probably have a better chance looking at the herps for similarities, I think.
The herps and the plants.
Yeah, the plants. The plants are incredibly similar.
The birds, some of the birds are probably pretty similar too.
The turtles, I would say, are the most similar.
So some connections, some lingering connections.
Yeah.
I think that one very interesting connection to the past, but more to the Ice Age than to the Miocene, was the story of the salamanders, because I was really amazed that you have such a diversity of species in a relatively small area. I mean, in Spain, we only have like 2 kinds of salamanders. And so I read that there is an influence of the warming of the climate, so that the salamanders have been like marooned on the highlands that are now separated by lowlands that are warmer and less ideal for them, or something like that. Like, so they have evolved in relative isolation of their own pockets. And so when I try to ID, of course, only with the help of you locals, otherwise it was really desperate. But still, some of the salamander species there, even the experts can only tell them apart by checking their DNA, because they are definitely different species because of their DNA, their genetic structure, but you can hardly tell them apart. So it must be a rapid evolution.
Mauricio, do you remember when you found the red eft, when you walked up in front of Briar and I. And I think, what was your reaction when you first saw it? Do you remember?
Absolutely. Yeah. I thought it has to be a plastic toy. I mean, this can't be real because it was so obvious, so bright orange. And on top of that, it was in the middle of the dirt road. So anybody could just, stomp on it. And it was so unconcerned. So I just lay down on the ground, hoping for it to move and prove that it was alive. And move it did. But it really was like too obvious, too unconcerned, and too pretty to be real. So that was really shocking.
I've got to get off here, Mauricio, but I'm going to run and get Briar, but you can continue on with a few more questions with these guys, okay? I'll see you later.
Okay, see you. Thank you, Blaine.
Thanks, Blaine. All right, we do have a couple more questions here in the audience. So let's see if we can get through these. Janice asks, Mauricio, have you ever been to the Galapagos where animals are completely tolerant of humans?
Wish I have. No, never had this privilege. And I learned that it must be quite a stressful experience to pass all the controls that you have to go through in order not to contaminate the biota there. Like if you carry just a seed of some kind of plant, you are endangering that ecosystem. So you really have to go through very intensive checks. And wow, it's but still I don't give up hope. Really, it must be wonderful.
And then we've got one other question here from the audience. Michael asks, Mauricio, what is next for you?
Yeah, good question. In terms of wildlife, I never know, because whenever I get an assignment that takes me anywhere, then I'm always looking forward to see the wildlife there. And Tennessee was so good. It was beyond my expectations. So in the meantime, I'm concentrating on doing what I'm being paid for. I'm creating some paleontologic murals for European museums. So that keeps me very busy. And I don't give up hope visiting the excavations of the Batallones fossil site here in Madrid this summer, which apparently there are going to be excavations. So I never miss the chance of seeing some saber-toothed cat fossils coming from the ground. And anything else is remains to be seen if it will happen. For instance, I have a trip that I was proposed by a Spanish tour operator, a trip to Tanzania, which would combine wildlife and paleontology. So it would be an occasion to share with the participants the continuity of life in the African Rift Valley from the Pleistocene. So we would visit places like Olduvai, Laetoli, the classic fossil sites, and then see the modern wildlife, at work in Serengeti, Ngorongoro. And so that's the kind of expedition that makes me very, very excited. But there are all those uncertainties, related to the pandemics, and we cannot say if it's going to be safe to travel in July. So I have to keep my suitcases ready, so to speak, but I don't know if we will go. So anyway, I want to keep hopeful, and if we don't go this year, there will be other years. But so there's all kinds of exciting prospects. We shall see what happens.
All right. Well, we've been going for about an hour. I've got one more question that I want to ask, but before I do that, Wally, was there anything else you wanted to say?
Not really, other than, how soon are you coming back, Mauricio?
I really cross my fingers that it will happen sooner than later. So, the place became my home very quickly. And so I can teletransport myself there with my mind, and it feels so nice. So I hope we can meet before too long.
Yeah, and we need to get you here during the summer. I mean, I feel like we owe you some local bears here at the house, and I think they conveniently showed up last time right after you left, because they were, I think you refer to them as cheeky, because they were like, he's gone now, so we're going to show up.
Yeah, hello. yeah, hopefully. And then I can see some white-tailed deer with their antlers on their heads.
Yeah, we had a pair that stuck around all summer, and we got to watch their antlers grow all summer. And
Wow.
They favored our peach tree, and they would come visit the peach tree almost every night and eat the peaches that had fallen. And it was, I had never seen them do this before. They would pick them up and roll them around in their mouth and then spit out the pit.
Oh, wow. And you have that on video?
Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah, I'll have to send those to you. It was really, really pretty funny to see.
Wow.
But it was neat to see the velvet covered antlers grow throughout the season. So it was.
Yeah. Those things sound like commonplace to you, but I miss them completely. So
yeah. But the funny thing is we know they shed those antlers every year, but we have yet to find one of those on the property. They I think they go somewhere else that time of year. So
that's interesting.
I don't think we have good winter food resources right where I live, and so I think they go elsewhere during the winter.
Okay, that would make sense. Yeah.
All right. Well, Mauricio, I've got one last question for you before we wrap up. So when we were talking about advertising for this event, and you had written up some of your thoughts on this documentary, you had talked about this being a way for you to, show your appreciation and give back to East Tennessee, this place that you got to spend some time. Can you talk a bit about that before we wrap up? Sort of what was your mentality going into making this documentary?
Yeah, it's there's this feeling like when people come to Madrid and they ask me about the monuments or everything, and I really have to admit, okay, I have never seen that or that other monument. I have lived here all my life, and it was like those very special wildlife encounters I had. It's only normal that they would be overlooked by people living there. But if by watching this film, people can get a renewed appreciation, and then next day look twice at this or that other animal, I think that would be, well, a small contribution. But on the other hand, I was taken places by people who already knew very well what treasures you have, and so it was like having excellent field guides, and I think there was no point in just watching my footage back at home and saying, I was happy, I was lucky to see that. I think it's really only fair that I can give it some shape so that it is easier to share it back with you. So yeah, it's satisfying.
Well, I can say I'm not a native of East Tennessee, but I do live here now, and it was really cool to get to see, because I agree with what you say. I definitely walk through and overlook those kinds of things when I'm just going along my day.
Yeah, it's
So-
easy to take them for granted.
Yeah, and we've gotten comments in the chat from people saying the same thing. So I think that it had the desired effect. So we really appreciate that. All right, well, I think we're going to go ahead and wrap up now. We've been going a good amount of time. Mauricio, thank you for making this documentary. Thank you for joining us. That shortened amount of time you got to spend with us back during that spring. And thank you for joining us for this Q&A.
It's my great pleasure. And yeah, just hoping that that I can get back before too long and keep sharing. So of course, thank you for hosting and allowing my film to get to more people.
And thanks, of course, to Blaine and Wally for being here, for hosting this event, and also for hosting you, Mauricio, when you were here. Chris was here and he had to go as well. As a reminder to all of our listeners, this video will be archived on our Facebook page. So if you missed the first half of it or something, you can go check it out. And if you follow the stuff that we're doing here at the Gray Fossil site, tomorrow we are coming back with Paleo Talks. We're going to have Adrian Lister on talking about mammoths and mammoth evolution and mammoth DNA and cool stuff like that. So there's more to come. But for now, we're going to get off here. Happy Earth Day to everybody. Yep. Hopefully you
Happy
appreciate the nature around you at some point today.
Absolutely.
All right. Goodbye, everybody.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Thank you.